The universe is old. So old that most civilizations have forgotten the taste of struggle, the bite of hunger, the sharp edge of survival. Across the stars, species rise and fall, but a pattern remains. Progress leads to comfort, and comfort dulls the claws of necessity. Empires sprawl across the void, their inhabitants living in peace, shielded from nature's brutality. But there is one world, one aberration, where comfort was never given, where survival was never guaranteed. A place where evolution was war, and war was evolution. Earth. In the vast halls of the Galactic Council, a hushed tension clings to the air. High Chancellor Zilvor of the Vazari Dominion stands before the assembly, his elongated form radiating displeasure. The chamber is filled with representatives from dozens of species, elders from the ZYYTH coalition, scholars from the Turnek theocracy, merchants from the Tari trade syndicate. All are gathered for one reason: the human problem. A holographic projection flickers to life above the council floor. It shows a world of violence. Massive storms tear across its surface, oceans churn with titanic force, and its land is scarred by volcanic fury. Predators roam its forests, creatures of fang and claw, each more monstrous than the last. Yet the most dangerous thing on this world is not its beasts, it is the species that emerge from its chaos. They call themselves humans, Zilvor announces, his voice laced with disdain. A species that should not exist. A species that thrives where others perish. A species that, left unchecked, will unmake the order we have maintained for millennia. The assembled leaders murmur. Some have encountered humans already. Their reports are troubling. They are aggressive, the ZYYTH delegate says, her bioluminescent skin dimming with unease. Their history is war, conquest, and destruction. They do not seek balance. They seek dominance. They are unpredictable. Atari trader chimes in. Their ability to adapt surpasses even our most advanced AI constructs. A human fleet, vastly outnumbered, should not win. And yet they do. They are terrifying, an Erdaxi general admits, his exoskeleton shifting with discomfort. When facing extinction, most species surrender. Humans do not. They fight. And worse, they win. Zilvor raises a hand, silencing the whispers. The galaxy has known peace for eons. This species is a threat to that peace. They do not understand restraint. They do not negotiate from weakness. They only respect power, and in time, they will realize they have more of it than any of us. His gaze sweeps the chamber. The time to act is now. Before it is too late. A new image fills the holographic display, a human, clad in primitive body armor, holding an outdated ballistic weapon. A relic of war by galactic standards. And yet, this same primitive stood atop the smoldering wreckage of a Zalvar war machine, victorious. Alone. A representative of the Corvani technocracy, a species known for its cold logic, tilts his head. Explain this anomaly. By all metrics, that soldier should have perished. Humanity does not abide by metrics. Zilvor growls. They should have perished countless times over. Their world should have crushed them before they ever left their atmosphere. But they adapted. They endured. While we built fleets to ward off invaders, they turned themselves into weapons. It is not their technology that makes them dangerous. It is what lies beneath their skin. The chamber falls into silence. None can deny the truth in his words. Perhaps we are overreacting. A voice interjects, a diplomat from the Euthelian Concordat, a species known for its pacifism. Surely, humanity can be reasoned with. If given the opportunity to join the council, they may embrace our ways, learn to temper their aggression. A sharp, humorless laugh escapes Zilvor. Have you studied them? Have you seen what they have done to their own kind? Peace is a dream they indulge only in the absence of an enemy. And when no enemy exists, they create one. The diplomat shifts uncomfortably but does not argue. A final image appears on the hologram, a battlefield. Not one of steel and laser fire, but of mud, blood, and fire. It is old, ancient by galactic standards. The trenches stretch endlessly, bodies strewn across the wasteland. Men in ragged uniforms claw their way through hell, not for resources, not for conquest, but simply because the alternative is death. They fought like this, Zilvor says, his voice quiet now. Before the stars. Before technology. Before they had any reason to. They waged wars so brutal that even now, in the era of planetary annihilation, no other species has matched the scale of their self-inflicted slaughter. He looks around the room, his expression grim. And you think they will bow to us? Silence. A decision must be made. Across the chamber, thoughts shift from fear to action. The galaxy has two choices: eradicate the human race before they can spread further, or prepare for the day they come to claim what they believe is theirs. For Earth has bred monsters, not prey. And the galaxy is only just beginning to understand what that means. The Zalvar Dominion had conquered over 50 worlds without resistance worth remembering. Their fleets darkened the skies of countless civilizations, their war machines crushed entire armies before they could muster a defense. To them, war was a science, predictable, methodical, efficient. They did not understand chaos. They did not understand Earth. When the first Zalvar scout ships breached the atmosphere, they observed a world divided. Countless nations, conflicting ideologies, fractured leadership. They saw primitive combustion-based weaponry, a reliance on kinetic munitions, and an absence of centralized planetary defense. To the Zalvar, humanity was not an opponent. It was a resource waiting to be harvested. The invasion began with surgical precision. Coordinated strikes against key infrastructure, cybernetic warfare disrupting communications, orbital bombardments eliminating potential resistance. The fleet commander, Overlord Psychret, had been assured that this war would not last a cycle. The humans lacked unity. Their weapons were outdated. Their armies, spread thin by internal conflicts, would fall like all the others. But there was something off. Even as their satellites were blinded, their networks corrupted, their governments fractured, humanity did not break. The Zalvar expected fear. They expected submission. What they received was something else entirely. The first sign came in the form of missing units. Squads deployed into cities reported back as planned, until they didn't. No distress signals. No final transmissions. Just silence. Patrols sent to investigate found nothing but empty streets and abandoned vehicles. But there was no panic in these places. No signs of civilians running. No chaos. It was as if the cities had simply swallowed their people whole. Then came the bodies. Not human bodies. Zalvar. Discovered in alleyways strung up from lampposts, left as grim warnings. Some had been shot. Others had their armor pried open with crude tools, their insides torn apart with brutal efficiency. One was found impaled on a metal fence, its carapace shattered, its weapons missing. It had not been scavenged for resources. It had been studied. The reports were dismissed at first. Isolated incidents. The work of desperate stragglers. But the disappearances did not stop. They increased. Entire battalions sent into urban centers simply vanished. Command outposts received garbled transmissions, whispers of movement in the darkness, the sound of something breathing just beyond sight. Then more silence. The Zalvar adjusted their strategy. They deployed heavier units, mechanized walkers, air support. Their forces advanced with flamethrowers, incinerating buildings where resistance could hide. The humans would be flushed out. They would be exterminated. And yet, no matter how many fires were lit, the darkness remained. Human tactics defied logic. They did not engage in open battle. They did not meet the Zalvar in the streets for a glorious last stand. Instead, they struck from the shadows. They hunted. They turned war into something primal, something ancient. Zalvar soldiers began refusing to patrol alone. Helmets recorded the last moments of fallen warriors, footsteps approaching from behind, a brief struggle, then nothing. Even in full-body armor, with enhanced vision and motion sensors, they died without firing a single shot. It was as if the humans could smell their fear. One squadron stationed in a ruined skyscraper reported movement in the lower floors. They locked down the exits, expecting to trap the enemy inside. But when they moved in to sweep the building, the lights flickered. Their instruments glitched. The temperature dropped unnaturally. Moments later, a scream. Not the sound of a plasma blast, not the explosion of a grenade, just a single, raw, terrified scream. The squad leader turned, but his soldiers were already gone. No gunfire, no bodies. Just empty armor pieces, torn open like hollow shells. The Zalvar began to feel something they had never known. Something their war doctrine had never accounted for. Dread. Overlord Psychert ordered a planetary broadcast, demanding human surrender. There was no response. Instead, an intercepted transmission played across all frequencies. Not in Zalvar language. In theirs. A single voice, calm, unwavering. Asterisk. You are not hunters here. Asterisk. The meaning was clear. The Zalvar pushed harder. Their ground forces locked entire districts under martial law. Any human suspected of aiding resistance was executed. Cities were leveled. Yet, despite their overwhelming firepower, they were still losing. The humans did not fight for territory. They did not defend strongholds or hold positions. They fought for survival. And in survival, they were unmatched. The turning point came when a Zalvar command ship, stationed in low orbit, suffered catastrophic system failure. Security footage later recovered showed the impossible. A single human, clad in scavenged armor, had infiltrated the vessel. Not through brute force. Not with an army. Alone. He had walked through corridors filled with elite Zalvar warriors. Not a single one had seen him coming. By the time the alarms rang, he was already deep within the ship's reactor core. His final act was not a desperate suicide attack, not a futile last stand. He sabotaged the core with surgical precision, ensuring the ship's destruction before vanishing. No escape pods were launched. No traces of him were found. The Zalvar finally understood. This was not a war. It was a hunt. And they were the prey. The Zalvar Dominion had never encountered an enemy like this. Their fleets, once symbols of absolute power, now bore the scars of a war they had not anticipated. Human resistance had evolved beyond mere survival. It had become something far more dangerous, calculated retaliation. What began as scattered insurgencies had transformed into an organized campaign of destruction. Humanity did not fight conventionally. They adapted. They learned. Every battle refined their methods, every captured weapon was repurposed, every mistake corrected with brutal efficiency. The Zalvar found themselves trapped in an escalating conflict where their technological superiority meant nothing. Entire cities became kill zones. Zalvar forces moving through urban centers found their supply lines severed, their reinforcements cut off. Drones were jammed, patrols disappeared, and armored convoys were ambushed by enemies who struck with surgical precision before vanishing. What should have been an occupation became an endurance test, and the Zalvar were losing. Reports flooded the Dominion's high command. The humans had begun using their own technology against them. Captured energy rifles were modified to fire hotter and faster. Stolen combat exosuits were improved, stripped of failsafes, and pushed beyond original specifications. Even starships, once deemed too advanced for human comprehension, had been hijacked, reverse-engineered, and launched against their former masters. The Dominion fleet, once untouchable, was no longer safe. Human strike teams infiltrated hangars, sabotaging engines and overloading reactor cores. Their pilots, despite lacking formal training in galactic combat, displayed an instinctive grasp of battle tactics that defied simulation models. They did not fight by the rules of the Dominion. They invented new ones. When a Zalvar dreadnought, the Viator, was boarded mid-battle, its entire crew was slaughtered before a distress signal could be sent. The warship, meant to be a beacon of Zalvar dominance, turned its guns against its own fleet. The human pilot who seized control didn't waste time on threats or negotiations. He issued only one transmission. Asterisk. Run. Asterisk. And they did. For the first time in recorded history, a Zalvar fleet retreated. The Dominion's warriors, conditioned for conquest, were now on the defensive. Their commanders issued desperate orders: contain the human threat, reinforce occupied sectors, prevent them from spreading beyond the Sol system. But it was too late. Humanity was no longer just fighting for survival. They were expanding. Captured ships formed the backbone of a new fleet. Factories repurposed from war-torn cities churned out weapons at an impossible rate. Tactical doctrines were rewritten daily, evolving faster than the Dominion could react. The Zalvar were accustomed to predictable enemies, species that adhered to strategies shaped by centuries of stagnation. But humanity had been forged in conflict. Every generation had fought its own wars, each deadlier than the last. They did not fear war. They understood it. Then came the most devastating realization of all. The Dominion had assumed humanity's aggression was driven by desperation, that their ferocity was a byproduct of being cornered. But as the war dragged on, as humans pushed further into Zalvar-controlled space, a horrifying truth emerged. Humanity was enjoying this. Not in the mindless, bloodthirsty way of lesser warlike species. This was something else. A test. A challenge. A proving ground. Every victory fueled their hunger to learn, to improve, to become deadlier. They had been confined to one world for too long, their potential restrained by the limits of their own reach. But now, the galaxy had opened before them, and they intended to claim it. The Dominion's leaders convened in desperation. Strategies were rewritten. Diplomats, once silent, were now deployed in haste. They had assumed humanity would never accept peace. That was no longer the question. The real question was whether humanity would allow it. A final counteroffensive was launched. A fleet larger than any before was assembled, tasked with breaking Earth's resistance once and for all. Every remaining warship, every elite warrior, every technological advantage the Dominion possessed was thrown into the battle. They would not merely defeat humanity. They would erase them. But when the fleet arrived, Earth was empty. No resistance. No defenses. Only silence. For a moment, the Zalvar dared to believe they had won. That humanity had finally exhausted itself, that their relentless assault had faltered. That belief lasted mere hours. Then the messages started. Intercepted transmissions from Dominion core worlds. Unidentified vessels appearing in restricted sectors. Sabotage reports from secure military installations. The war was not over. It had only changed battlefields. Humanity had learned everything they needed. And now, they were the invaders. The Zalvar had believed themselves untouchable. For centuries, they had ruled through fear, their conquests swift and absolute. Their enemies never fought back for long. Resistance was always temporary. Even those who resisted the longest eventually fell, broken beneath the weight of superior technology and overwhelming force. But now, they faced something different. Something far worse. Humanity had not crumbled under occupation. They had not accepted their place as another footnote in the Dominion's history. Instead, they had turned war into an art form, their tactics evolving with a precision that defied prediction. And now, they were no longer defending their home. They were taking the fight to the stars. The first Zalvar world fell without a single battle. A prosperous colony, heavily fortified, garrisoned by veterans who had fought in a dozen campaigns. But when the sun rose over the capital, the planet's command centers were silent. The defense grid deactivated. Outposts emptied. Entire legions had vanished overnight. Surveillance footage recovered later showed the impossible. Humans had landed without detection, dismantling defenses, eliminating leadership, and taking control of the planet without a single civilian casualty. Not through brute force. Through precision. The Dominion scrambled to respond. Reinforcements were sent, but the moment the fleet arrived, they found the colony's own ships turned against them. Humanity had not simply taken the world. They had assimilated it, repurposing its infrastructure within days. What should have been a month-long campaign of reconquest ended in hours, the Zalvar fleet retreating under fire from what had once been their own weapons. That was only the beginning. Across the sector, planets fell like dominoes. not through planetary invasions or orbital bombardments, but through something far more insidious. Humanity did not march in with overwhelming numbers. They infiltrated. They destabilized. Leaders disappeared, factories were repurposed, supply lines collapsed. Entire fleets went silent, later found adrift in space with no signs of battle. Panic spread through the Dominion's high command. Their enemy was no longer a desperate, war-torn species fighting for survival. They were conquerors, moving with the precision of a species that had spent centuries preparing for this moment. Humanity had been tested by war for generations, refining their strategies, adapting to every challenge. And now, they were applying that knowledge on a galactic scale. Desperate to halt the momentum, the Dominion deployed its most feared warlords. High Executor Valek, renowned for his brutality, launched a counteroffensive, determined to show humanity the true wrath of the Zalvar. He struck back with overwhelming force, wiping out entire cities, leaving ruin in his wake. He took no prisoners, made no offers of surrender. If humanity was willing to play the role of conqueror, he would remind them what it meant to be hunted. His campaign lasted less than a month. On the eve of his greatest victory, as his fleet surrounded a key human stronghold, his flagship went dark. For hours, no one could reach him. Then the emergency beacon activated, broadcasting a single video feed to every Zalvar warship in the sector. There was Valek, once a towering figure of authority, now bound, bloodied, his breathing ragged. A shadow loomed behind him, human, helmeted, face unreadable. The figure spoke in perfect Zalvar. Asterisk. We are not prey. Asterisk. Then the feed cut. When the fleet finally breached the ship's security, they found Valek's personal guards slaughtered, his command center reduced to a blood-stained ruin. Of the warlord himself, there was no sign. The only message left behind, scrawled onto the wall in a language the Zalvar barely understood. Asterisk. Hunted. Asterisk. The psychological toll was immediate. Soldiers stationed on border worlds began requesting reassignment. Officers double-checked their own security clearances, paranoia infecting even the most disciplined ranks. The once unshakable Dominion had become afraid. The Council convened in secrecy, the same leaders who once dismissed humanity now speaking in hushed, fearful tones. They had always believed power was measured by technological supremacy, by military might. But humanity had redefined warfare. They did not simply fight battles. They ended them before they began. They did not strike with brute force. They struck where it hurt the most, where no one expected, in ways no one could counter. And the worst part? They were still getting better. A final message arrived at the Dominion's core world. A transmission sent from deep within their own territory, bypassing every security measure. No encryption could stop it. No firewall could block it. It simply played, undeniable, in every command center, on every military outpost, across every fleet. A simple voice. Asterisk. You should have left us alone. Asterisk. The war was no longer about survival. It was about dominance. And humanity had already decided the outcome. The Dominion was collapsing. What had once been an empire of absolute control was now a shattered ruin of fear and desperation. Humanity had dismantled its power, not with grand battles or planetary sieges, but with precision, patience, and an understanding of war that no other species possessed. Entire fleets drifted lifeless in space, their commanders gone before alarms could even sound. Worlds once thriving under the Dominion's rule had gone dark, their populations unharmed but their rulers missing. Military outposts, fortified against any known threat, had been infiltrated so efficiently that by the time the alarm was raised, the threat was already gone. The Dominion's high command was fractured. Its warlords either dead, missing, or refusing to take the field. Trust had eroded within their own ranks. Officers questioned every order, afraid that hidden among them were humans who had learned their ways, who had studied their weaknesses. Then, the impossible happened. The Dominion's homeworld, untouched by war for millennia, protected by the most formidable defenses in the galaxy, went silent. No explosions, No invasion. Just silence. Communications ceased, patrols vanished, entire sectors of the planet shut down. When the emergency signal was finally sent out, it was not a distress call. It was a single-word transmission, a message that sent terror through every surviving Dominion leader. Asterisk. Taken. Asterisk. In a single night, the heart of the Zalvar Dominion had been claimed. Their leaders, once proud and untouchable, had been removed so efficiently that no one even knew how it had happened. The most fortified world in the known galaxy had fallen without a single visible battle. The remnants of the Dominion's fleets, scattered and leaderless, began surrendering without resistance. Entire armadas, once feared across the stars, powered down their weapons and transmitted unconditional offers of submission. The war was over. But humanity did not answer. For days, silence stretched across the stars. No demands. No proclamations of victory. No declaration of conquest. The galaxy watched in dread, waiting to see what the victors would do next. Some hoped humanity would take the Dominion's place, rule as its new masters. Others feared something worse, that they would not stop here. When the response finally came, it was not a speech, not a show of force. Just a simple statement, broadcast across every known frequency, in every language. Asterisk. We were never your prey. Asterisk. And with that, humanity vanished from the galactic stage. The Dominion's territories remained intact, but their power had been erased. Their rule was over. Their fleets, once unstoppable, were left drifting, their weapons useless. Their colonies, once symbols of strength, now stood directionless, waiting for leadership that would never return. The galaxy changed that day. No one knew where humanity had gone. They had taken what they wanted, their vengeance, their justice, and disappeared. Their ships no longer appeared on sensors. Their transmissions ceased. No fleets patrolled their borders. No soldiers occupied conquered worlds. They had proven their point. And they had left a warning. The Dominion had believed itself the master of war, the apex of power. But Earth had bred something different. Something no empire could ever hope to control. Predators.